Hi, how are you? Good afternoon and welcome to an international debate on the campus of the University of North Texas, and happy St. Patrick's Day! Yay! My name is Brian Lane. I'm the director of debate here at Texas's highest internationally ranked debate team. We have an excellent program planned for you this afternoon. First, before we get started, make sure you have silenced or turned off your cell phones. We have some sensitive equipment in the room. If you need to sign up for extra credit, there are sign-up sheets right in the front here with Mr. Sloss. Let me tell you that UNT students from all areas and from all around campus have been interested and involved in international debate on campus here at the University of North Texas. In fact, today is a very special day, not only because it's St. Patrick's Day, but also today we're going to celebrate the 45th anniversary of the first debate against the Japanese here in North Texas. In fact, if you look inside your pamphlet, you can see the campus newspaper article from 1969, which involved North Texas debating the debaters from Japan. They were both from Sophia University. Let me tell you a little history of that tour. You see, international debate had been going on for quite a while. If you were with us for the British events, you know that British started traveling the United States in the early 1920s. But the Japanese debate started in 1969. There was a need that people felt to have new competitors, to bring in other countries to debate against Americans in the United States. And there were particular university interests at the University of Hawaii that tried to be interested with that. And they suggested, hey, let's do the Japanese, let's talk about having a tour where we host Japanese students to travel around the United States. But there was something unusual going. They started planning a tour in 1967, and then the tour got officially planned in 1968, and it happened in the spring of 1969. And can you think of what was going on at American colleges in 1969? Any guesses? A little thing called the war in Vietnam was going on in 1969. Absolutely. And in fact, it was decided that the team of Japanese debaters that came across, the first team ever from Japan, would debate the topic, resolve that the United States should withdraw all military and economic aid from Far East Asia. That was the first topic that the Japanese ever debated in the United States. The topic was very controversial because it obviously reckoned to American war politics at the time. In fact, the tour almost never happened. You see, the plan was to select two Japanese debaters at what was then the Japanese National Debate Tournament held at Sophia University. The problem was that in November of 1968, when they were supposed to hold the competition, there was no tournament. Do you know why? Because there were student riots in Tokyo, Japan, and students had taken over all of Sophia University. The president was locked in his room because there was a series of sit-ins. In fact, from the historical record, there are handwritten notes going back and forth between the debate coach at Sophia and the debate coaches in the United States of America saying, I have no power in my office. I'm writing this by candlelight. I hope we can still do the tour. And they got together to send two Japanese students, obviously, in 1969. And when they did, the day that they arrived in the United States, the day they arrived, the governor of California, you might know this guy, a gentleman named Ronald Reagan. The day they arrived, Ronald Reagan declared the campus of UC Berkeley a riot zone and declared martial law on the campus. That's how bad the situation was in 1969. Well, the Japanese team toured across 38 different universities, and one of their stops in that very first tour was here at Texas, at what was then North Texas State University. You can see from the insert some of the storyline. You can tell there were a lot of other things going on campus. You could go and see the Beatles in Dallas at the same time that this was going on. By the way, only a $2 cover, $2.69 at the door. Unbelievable, but that's true. You can check it. All of that happened, and the first debate between North Texas and the Japanese debaters was broadcast on the television station, and it had a wide audience, and they had a great time discussing all of the different things that they have going on there. Well, we are very, very excited to welcome our guests from Japan to come on this 45th tour. Can we get a round of applause for them? Now, let me genuine spirit of international cooperation and in recognition of this 45th anniversary of the tour, we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We're not going to debate just against the Japanese. We're going to do what we call a split teams debate, where we will have the University of North Texas students debate with the Japanese students, and the Japanese debaters debate with the University of North Texas students. Do you want to show us what it'll look like? It's very dramatic. Very dramatic, everybody. They made them switch around the long end of the table. Ah, there we go. Our split teams debate. Our split teams debate. Now, we're no stranger to international debate here in North Texas, but we have quite a treat for you here this afternoon. Not only because it's St. Patrick's Day, again, we love St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is wonderful evidence that God loves the University of North Texas, because God loves the mean green, right? Woo! Yes, yes, yes. In fact, there are so many patron saints that it's sometimes hard for us to keep them all clear. I mean, St. Patrick we got, right? But especially on St. Patrick's Day, it's hard for us to keep all of the patron saints aligned in different ways. Well, not just on St. Patrick's Day, but also maybe especially on St. Patrick's night. It's very hard to keep those straight-headed. But we're lucky because today we have not only 4 debaters in our presence, but we also have patron saints in disguise. Patron saints in disguise. So let me introduce the affirmative team. Well, first of all, we've got our Japanese team here, Naoki Takami from Waseda University, and Amane Hirota from Hokkaido University. The affirmative team this evening is going to consist of Naoki Takami of Waseda University. Now, Naoki, you might notice he's a little bit familiar there. In fact, he's also known as Saint Gertrude of Nivelles, who is the patron saint of the fear of mice. See, look at him right here. There he is. You see, Saint Gertrude, she was the younger daughter of the Blessed Pepin I of Landon, and she built a double monastery that apparently was full of rats. It was full of rats. And so when she ascended to sainthood, she was known as the patron saint of the fear of mice, or saurophobia. So we thank Naoki for that. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate that. He is going to be debating today. Oh, by the way, he's right at home here in Texas. Feels very comfortable. He's going to be debating today with Mr. Angel Garcia. Where's Angel at? There he is. There's that guy. Now you might be thinking, that Angel Garcia gentleman, he looks very familiar. You would be right, because we know him better as Saint Brendan, the navigator, patron saint of the whales. See, there he is. There's Saint Brendan. He was educated by Saint Ida of Calidi and Saint Eric of Cary, and he was a friend of Saint Columba. And the story goes that Brendan, or Angel as we know him, and his brothers figure into a voyage, which is a tale of monks traveling the Atlantic, evangelizing the islands, possibly even reaching the Americas in the 6th century. And at one stop, they sat upon a small island to celebrate Easter Mass. They lit a fire to celebrate Easter Mass, and then they learned that that island was an enormous whale. That Angel and Naoki are going to debate against their opponents on the negative. First we'll have Amane Hirota, who's also known as Saint Monica, the patron saint of alcoholics. You can see the resemblance right there. Saint Monica was also the mother of Saint Augustine of Hippo, whose writings about her are a primary source of information. She had a very, very wild life, but she was a spiritual student of Saint Ambrose of Milan and was herself a reformed alcoholic, hence her patronage of alcoholics. So we thank you, Amane, for that. He also fits right in here in Texas. It's like he's been here all of his life. He is joined by Mr. Khushal Piracha from UNT Debate. Now, Khushal, we know him very well. We think of him as St. Joseph of Cupertino. Why? Because he's often seen floating around campus. You see, St. Joseph had a tendency to levitate during prayer, sometimes in the form of a cross. Pretty close there, Khushal. Some people came to see it as much as they might see a circus sideshow. People actually visited him while he was praying. St. Joseph's gift led him to be humble, patient, and obedient, even though at times he was greatly tempted and felt forsaken by God, he fasted and wore iron chains much of his life. Right, Khushal? Yes. Absolutely. Now, I've poked a little bit of fun of our debaters, but I don't want to leave myself out of it. In fact, I am today not only St. Joseph is the patron saint of pilots. I don't want to leave myself out of it. I am, in fact, known also as St. Hubert, the patron saint of mad dogs. You see, St. Hubert was the grandson of Cheribert, the king of Toulouse, and the eldest son of Bertrand. He owned many titles and wealth, and he took care of his son and his patrimony and his brother. He was highly revered in the Middle Ages. There were several military orders named for his honor in association with the hunt for his patronage, which led him to be mainly his patron saint of furriers, trappers, those against rabies, and those against bad behavior in dogs, especially hunting dogs. So, today we're going to have a discussion of the debate of nuclear power plants. The debate itself is going to involve 4 5-minute constructive speeches, each followed by a 3-minute cross-examination period. Then we'll have a period in which we can field your questions to the debaters, which I'll moderate. Please raise your hand to ask questions. Finally, each side will have a 5-minute closing statement. You can also participate in the debate by following us on Twitter and Facebook, and especially today you can use hashtag UNTDebate to keep up with everything that's going on right now. Now please, keep in mind that the arguments presented this afternoon may or may not reflect the actual views of the speaker. In order to have a civil discussion, you may hear persons defending argument that they do not believe in from time to time in the name of argument, playing the part of a devil's advocate, which is nice given that they're all saints, isn't it? But they'll be playing the part of a devil's advocate, so keep that in mind as we hear different reputations. So I'm going to turn it over with no further delay to our first affirmative speaker, Mr. Prime Minister.
First of all, before starting my speech, I will show you my greatest gratitude to all of you here. Thank you for inviting me to such great university, and thank you for coming today. Please enjoy today's debate, and I will do my best. And let me talk about my Japanese friends, Amane Hirota, a little bit. Before coming to this university, I went to Florida, and he went to the beach because he is crazy about the American women. In hotel room, every day he said to me that if American women have the blonde hair, any woman is okay. So he's really crazy. So maybe I can win to this debate. Okay. Okay, I will begin my speech. Okay. The House believes that nuclear power plant should be abolished. We will show you 3 points why nuclear power plant should be abolished. First point is the accident of nuclear power plant. Second point is the uncertainty of the nuclear power plant. Third point is the nuclear proliferation. Let me begin with first point, accident of nuclear power plant. As long as we, the human, control nuclear power plant has entailed the several reasons for accident, such as misoperation, misconstruction, and natural disaster. Actually, the cause of Chernobyl accident is a misoperation and mismanagement. Actually, the cause of Fukushima accident is the old nuclear power plant, and tsunami came, and that's over. Such tsunami destroyed the nuclear reactor. Therefore, as long as we human control the nuclear power plant, we couldn't eliminate such risk of accident completely. Then, once accident happened, such human near the nuclear power plant couldn't live anymore. It is said that Fukushima accident Japan, it is said even after 3 years after the Fukushima accident, there are a lot of nuclear refugees in Japan. They lost their home, they lost their livelihood. Therefore, we should abolish nuclear power plant. This is first point. Second point is uncertainty. Nuclear power plant is uncertainty for everything because it's unstable. For example, as long as nuclear power plant is operated, it creates a much amount of nuclear waste. However, it leads to the undersea water and it gives damage on human rights and it gives damage on environment. However, we have no way to treat with it. Where should we remove the nuclear waste away, or how to dispose of this nuclear waste safely? We have no way. It's really uncertainty if we have nuclear power plant. Then the third point is the nuclear proliferation. In status quo, a lot of countries have nuclear power plant, such as Iran, North Korea, and China, or something like that. However, this situation is really dangerous for our lives because it automatically means that they could make nuclear weapons by using nuclear power plant. Therefore, it might happen that nuclear war. However, that we should avoid the nuclear war at any cost, right? Therefore, in conclusion, the nuclear power plant accident killed thousands of people, and we have no way to dispose of nuclear waste, and nuclear war should be avoided. That's all. Thank you very much. Yes.
And then the reason why that action occurred is human mispopulation and
Yes.
natural disaster. And I think that this proves that nuclear power plant is not inherently dangerous. Nuclear power plant itself is not dangerous. But
No.
this is because natural disaster or human mispopulation, which is beyond our control, human control, right?
No, it means that we humans couldn't control the nuclear power plant, right?
Then I want to know what differentiates from other. For example, if vehicle or car, as long as we use car, of course, we cannot eliminate the risk of action. What is different from such?
Your assumption is that the vehicle accident, traffic accident, and nuclear power plant accident is same, right? This is his assumption, right? However, such accident, traffic accident, and nuclear power plant is really different, right? Scale of accident is really different, right? Therefore, if the accident with nuclear power plant happens, we have to say the nuclear power plant should be.
And then I want to know what was the actual damage of the nuclear accident? For example, Fukushima or Chernobyl. How many people died over there? And I guess that in Fukushima, nobody died because of the nuclear power plant. Just refugees that could be calculated. So what is actual damage of this?
It is said that because of tsunami, the nuclear reactor was destroyed. Then it is said that radiation will be spread in many areas near the nuclear power plant. Then it is said that because of this emitting the radiation, such radiation will be accumulated in the human body, right? Therefore, the effect of accident will maybe appear in long term after 10
So
years.
let me change the question.
Yes.
I have a question about the third point, the nuclear proliferation. And then I want to know why uniquely after abolition of nuclear power plant, a country will develop such nuclear power. I simply imagine that even if there is no nuclear power plant, there is no reason why such country to develop such nuclear weapons.
I give up nuclear power plant. Therefore, that like this, once the one country abolishes nuclear power plant.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Because I'm Francis, I feel very honorable to be here and speaking in front of you, the previous for the audiences. Thank you, Mr. Piracha and Lady Davis. And my partner Takami said that I am pleasurable, a man who wins. But this is not true. I don't believe him. This is completely assertion. This is not true. Okay. First, the original side strongly believe that nuclear power plant should not be abolished. Then, to prove that, my presentation today consists of two proofs. The first, I will make you realize that nuclear power plant is not so dangerous as you imagine. And second proof, I will talk about how nuclear power plant benefit to our society in terms of environment and sustainability. Here, I start the first proof. Well, you may think that nuclear power plant is so dangerous, therefore you should abolish. But this is complete misconception because the house that radiation, because of radiation level is dangerous. However, this is completely wrong because even Fukushima accident, nobody died because of radiation. And even 3 years later, there's no evidence that because of radiation people die. Therefore, and moreover, the assumption is too much radiation is harms people's health. But just low level radiation rather gives us healthy effect because as long as we human lives, we must receive radiation from the earth or from the ground. Therefore, as the house must prove that this accident radiation level must over this it must lead to too much radiation, enough to harm human health. However, the house never believed that. Even Fukushima, nobody died because of radiation. Therefore, in terms of radiation level, the nuclear power plant is not so dangerous. Moreover, let me observe other power plants. For example, coal power plant emit radiation, and coal power plant harms people. Therefore, nuclear power plant is not inherently dangerous compared with other plants. Okay, please remember. Then, second part, let me talk about second part. Nuclear power plants should not be abolished because it benefits to our society. Because nuclear power plant never emit radiation, never emit CO2 gas, unlike coal power plant or other plants. Therefore, nuclear power plant is too eco-friendly. Then, on this point, that House argued that nuclear power plant produce waste or something. However, this is not unique to nuclear power plant because coal power plant also emits ashes or waste. Right? Therefore, this is not inherently to nuclear power plant. Then, go back to the action argument. The affirmative argued that because human cannot control the nuclear power plant, therefore it leads to action. But this is not unique to nuclear power plant, right? Because you can look at our cross-examination. Because as long as human, for example, if we use car, we cannot eliminate the risk of nuclear power plant, risk of accident. But this cannot be the reason why we should not buy the car. Therefore, this is not inherent to nuclear power plant. Therefore, nuclear power plant is not so dangerous compared with other human invention. Please remember. Then, on this point, the House argued that nuclear accident is too dangerous. Therefore, you should abolish. But they never proved that this accident is bigger than other vehicle accident. Or actually, in Fukushima or Chernobyl, nobody died because of radiation level. Right? Therefore, this accident is not so serious to consider. Please remember. Then I will talk about sustainability. Well, the affirmative sustainability. Nuclear power plant is very sustainable because even small amount of uranium, we can produce a large amount of electricity, and it never depends on weather condition. For example, if we use renewable energy such as wind or ocean power, it must depend on weather condition. If we cannot receive enough wind or enough sun power, we cannot produce enough energy. But as for nuclear power plant, it never depends on weather conditions. Therefore, we can
accidentally. You
Yeah.
said that in the Fukushima, people never die
Yeah.
by the radiation.
Yeah.
Then what do you think of the Chernobyl accident? Many people got the cancer and
Okay,
many
I
people died, right, by radiation. How can you say that such?
So I think that there's no evidence about because this radiation people die even in Chernobyl. This is my first. Moreover, I think that this, as you said, this Chernobyl accident is because of human operation. That means if we be careful about the operation, such big scale action can be prevented. Therefore, I think that this can also lead to abortion will happen.
Okay, next, you said that low level radiation is health for the people.
Yeah, healthy.
Okay, so your assumption is that even if accident happen, that such nuclear power plant emit low level radiation. It is your assumption, right?
No. For example, you can observe the Fukushima accident. Even Fukushima accident, it actually raises the level of radiation, but nobody was harmed because of this radiation. Therefore, I think that this radiation level is never beyond such threshold or dangerous level. And the radiation we usually receive, the human being usually receives the radiation from us. So, low level radiation is not so bad for humans.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Hey, how's everybody doing? So excited. Alright, here we go. So basically, just give a little map to everybody and see down the ideas, go down talking about our 3 points, accidents, uncertainty, proliferation, and then speaking of the areas of nuke power now being dangerous and being beneficial overall. Alright. So first off, let's speak on accidents and the idea that nuke power is not dangerous. First off, our opponents state Fukushima, nobody died, but they fail to mention the point that we made, stating that it made all these refugees, and all these people lost their livelihoods, and now there's misplaced within Japan, and they don't know where to go, or basically how to live. This argument wasn't really addressed, and so that should go to us. Also, they argue that any small amount of radiation is fine to people, which we can argue it is. But the issue is that last year, the WHO, the World Health Organization, did tests on the people that live within Fukushima, and they say that most of the children and the adults already had odd growths within their thyroids. Obviously, they can't really report on the effects long term until they grow older, until the children grow up. But the idea that it already affected them in such a crucial part of the human anatomy should be cause for alarm. They tell us that we have to prove that somehow radiation is very dangerous for us, and we present you a form of some evidence for you, basically saying that nuclear power is bad, it trades off with alternatives, and overall leads to health concerns. This is from Caldegot 2011, wrote after Fukushima, enough is enough, basically saying that millions of innocent people may face a medical catastrophe. Chernobyl accident, which we mentioned, poison rained out, creating hotspots of the northern hemisphere, basically stating that 40% of European landmass is now contaminated with cesium-137. There is radiation, not within just in Ukraine, but throughout all of Europe. And in fact, a million people have already died of causes linked to the Chernobyl accident. Fukushima may exceed Chernobyl in health. Companies work with the government, like to downplay the accident, but the nuclear power has been a Trojan horse. To downplay the accident, but overall, we know the true effects. So that's that piece of evidence. That should display that we show that radiation does harm people. Now, they also argue that the mismanagement is not unique to the nuclear power plant, which is fair. It is not unique. But the issue is that it's nuclear power. It's something that is inherently dangerous. If you get too close to it, your hair can fall off, your eye color can change. It can alter your body's chemistry. You can get cancer, among other health effects. They did not mention the argument on nuclear waste. The thing about nuclear waste that's so dangerous is we don't know how to manage it. And that links into our argument about uncertainty. A lot of these plants are example of how it works. When they're done and they have all these nuclear wastes, they put them in storage tanks near on site, and they keep them there until they get too dangerous. They used to just dump it in the ocean, but now we do a much smarter human thing, and we just build holes in the ground and stuff them there. So that gives you an idea of the mismanagement, and with nuclear power is inherently dangerous. Now let's look at their benefits here. They can argue that yes, it's efficient, they can produce a lot, but that's not true because nuclear plants are actually less reliable. They shut down all the time and can't be restarted quickly. I'll present you this evidence from 1108. The chairman and chief scientist of Rocky Mountain Institute. Even the most reliable plants are they fail unexpectedly for long periods of time. 132 nuclear plants, 20% will permanently close due to reliability and cost problems, while the 27% have failed for a year or at least one. However, nuclear-dependent regions are particularly at risk of drug safety problems or a possible terrorist that could close up many plants simultaneously. It's literally a laundry list of issues that can happen with plants. But to give an idea, if a plant gets too hot by any reason, it doesn't have to be a meltdown. It takes 2 weeks from that shutdown to bring it back up. That causes issues with electricity, demand, and issues with the power grid itself. And if you're wondering, oh, the safety and the reliability, since 1959 there's been 30 shutdowns and types of meltdowns within nuclear power. And right now there's 435 plants and about 71 under construction all over the world. If that isn't causing some form of alarm, just because, oh, well, in almost 50 or so, audience has only been 30 shutdowns or so. But the problem is that the magnitude of nuclear power and the dangers poses are greater than anything our opponents can present. Thank you.
So, first of all, do you know that Chernobyl is actually now a wildlife reserve where there have been new plant species discovered? And actually, the cancer rate in Chernobyl is no more than the cancer rate in Poland and all these other countries. So, that doesn't actually prove that accidents like Chernobyl have caused these problems.
Well, I personally would go back and do the evidence I presented, but I would argue that yes, the wildlife has flourished there, but us as people cannot. It's not habitable to us. Now, you said there's plants and wildlife there, so there's animals living there, or is it just plantation?
No, it's animals living there. It's actually named a wildlife reserve with actually 400 wolves and many reindeer populations.
Okay, that's fair, but at the same time, you can argue that the chemistry is not the same as people. Then not to be species or anything, but the argument is we're worried about people's well-being within an area that's radiated. That's what I'm arguing.
And what my counterpart actually wanted to get through was radiation doesn't actually kill people. Radiation harms them, just like coal power plants actually harm people by emitting smoke and all these other causes. So there's no proof that radiation actually kills rather than it harms. Just like in Gujarat, there was a blast actually in January which killed 2 people in a thermal power plant. So there is no trust in anything when it comes to energy.
Well, if there's no trust in anything, why would we do I would argue in that sense that, yeah, radiation harms, or anything can harm you. If it harms you long enough and fast enough, you could die. It is known that radiation will kill us. In fact, it's so powerful, it kills cancer. That's how powerful radiation is. Just to finish up, we would argue that even if anybody here or you don't buy the idea that radiation kills, the act doesn't still affect people negatively. There's refugees in Japan, refugees within your own country. The people in Chernobyl lived there. That was their livelihood. Now they moved out. There's areas where humans can't live there anymore. And people, whether you argue they die or not, still get sick.
But that's just like getting sick from thermal power plants or any other power plant that emit radiation or other forms of pollutants. So you're basically saying that we should not have electricity in the world.
I don't think that's what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that comes to the issue of nuclear power, we don't have a proper management of it. It's too dangerous. Our technology isn't there yet. You can argue, yes, we're building new power plants that are safer, but what about all the old power plants that are leaking and slowly crumbling? You would argue, basically argue all day about this, but we're basically saying that we as people, though we may have discovered nuclear power, we're not ready to manage it.
Hey everyone. Oh, hey everyone. Okay. So first of all, the topic today that we're emphasizing on is the fact that abolishing nuclear power plants. What we fail to believe is the fact that we cannot abolish nuclear power plants. It's impossible. Countries like France have a 75.6% rate of producing them. If we abolish them, countries are not going to have electricity, period. You cannot imagine a country without electricity. That is impossible. Second of all, 14% of the global electricity requirement is actually fulfilled by nuclear power plants. So in essence, you're trying to abolish something that cannot be done. It's just impossible to even imagine a world without enough electricity. Second of all, we can go on to say that nuclear power plants are actually beneficial in the sense that they don't emit CO2. They actually conserve the environment. The biggest issue for us right now is CO2 emissions, which is causing greenhouse gases to emit into the environment, and which is actually also causing cancer. So we can go on to say that nuclear power plants do harm people, but so does every other alternative form of energy. So we cannot really do anything to stop it, but we can do research into preventing it. And that's where I come to my next point. We have some of the largely funded regulatory commissions in the United States and in the world to take care of these things, so that we actually see a brighter future where we do not have greenhouse gases, where we can have better a form of energy producing companies and producing factories, so that we do not end up damaging the earth even more than we already have. Third of all, Chernobyl is actually one of the biggest known accidents in history, but what people don't know is the fact that Chernobyl is flourishing now. We see new plant life. We see a fungi that's actually growing in Chernobyl which absorbs radiation and not emits it. And we see that they have a wildlife reserve. And we see that it's growing now, and we see that we are growing out of the shell that we live in, where we're seeing the effects of this actually resulting in something good and not anything bad. Third of all, it's all energy production leading to waste is inevitable. So you cannot even argue the fact that just nuclear energy is bad. Every kind of energy is bad, and that is why we cannot even address this point without doing that. Third of all, they mentioned the fact that human error plays a big part. Well, that's actually the point. Human error plays the biggest part in this equation. You do not blame, when a drunk driver crashes into someone, you blame the drunk driver and not the car. It's just like that. You do not blame the power plant, you blame the people who made it. So we need to look into it. We need to have more expertise. We need to have more innovation. We need to look into the problem and actually solve it rather than just hiding away and actually shutting it down. Because that's how industries grow. That's how the human population evolves. We need change, and we need it fast because the world is not going to wait for us. Third of all, the cancer rates in Chernobyl are actually lesser than the cancer rates in Poland. So you can actually imagine that Chernobyl is not a ground for cancer. Yes, there have been proven cases for small amounts of increases in cancer rates, but Poland actually has a 20% cancer rate in regard to Chernobyl, which actually has a 15% cancer rate. Last of all, we say that health impacts are so much, but we don't focus on the fact that they're overstated. Even when the Fukushima blast happened, we saw that the blast ended up being the information received by many of the public officials were wrong. They were overstated. They were so overstated that people went into this state of panic that, you know, the nuclear power has just ruined the world, but it actually hasn't. You actually see that the data and statistics that we saw on the news were overstated and weren't as such a huge harm to society as we thought. Also, we talk about safe disposal, but safe disposal of anything is actually impossible. Coal power produces ash, which is actually packed and then also dumped into the sea, which causes radiation in fish and wildlife. So in the end, we're saying that everything we do actually leads to radiation. So we're saying that abolishing power plants won't really solve anything. Nuclear power plants won't really solve anything, because every other form of energy we use causes cancer. Thank you.
Alright, cool. Question time. So first off, let's talk about, so you provided no answer to the idea of refugees and people being misplaced. What do you say against that argument? I mean, yeah, you cannot, let's say you're right. I'm not saying, let's say you are. And it doesn't cause cancer. What about the misplaced people?
But we can leave that to actually forms of electricity like water power, solar power, which actually also results in people losing their homes because governments need that land to make these power plants. When you build a water powered power plant, you need a vast amount of area to be cleared off, and people lose their livelihoods. Just like in Pakistan, where people actually 800 people were misplaced just to build a dam and a power plant, and they lost all their farmlands just because the government told them to.
Safe to say, what do you know is the most powerful source of energy / destruction in the known world? Would you argue it's the atomic bomb? Nuclear power? Right. So, and you brought up the idea of like a coal plant, right, producing plenty of radiation. So if a coal plant were to fail and it caused some kind of explosion, it would be catastrophic, yeah? Now, people would die, it would be awful. Now, but that would be the intermittent effect. But if a nuclear power plant were to fail and explode, would you not argue that the ongoing radiation and effects of that and the initial blast would be greater than any other type of form of energy?
But we're arguing the fact that every form of energy does harm. A blast is a blast. Yes, it hasn't been proven yet that the nuclear radiation that was received by people during the Chernobyl blast has caused more cancer, because we see that rates in Poland, where the nuclear blast didn't actually happen, actually are more than the rates in Chernobyl, which have risen from 12 to 15%.
Can I ask this question? So this whole debate, you're just arguing that there's no point in abolishing because all energy is bad. So you're not actually advocating for any kind of improvement, because considering that all these other plants that are not new are deteriorating and crumbling, what do you say to that argument? Because it's clear, and our history shows that these old plants are inherently dangerous.
But our history also shows that these plants are needed. We need innovation and not just abolishing a whole range, a whole field that can actually benefit us. Coal power was as bad as any other electricity.
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, somehow we've finished the first part of our debate, and nobody has said that nuclear power turns you green, which is a good thing today. Now we have a time set aside for questions from our audience. So if you'll raise your hand, I'll call on you, and you can direct a question to one side, to one debater, or to all four of our participants. Cotton?
Okay, so my question's for the affirmative. So I don't know if you know anything about Centralia, Pennsylvania.
1962. It still burns. So really, since you're the affirmative side and you're wanting to abolish nuclear power plants, obviously that hasn't been resolved. We still do coal mining. In fact, since that incident, we've just cleaned it up. So wouldn't you kind of agree that although also we have power plants that melt down, shouldn't we more focus on fixing them instead of abolishing them?
I would argue that we're too far gone to just try to fix them. The issue has gone to a point where we can't get there anymore. Reports showing that it will cost 11 trillion yen in 40 years just to make the area within Fukushima workable. Like, for people to go in and start fixing things. The time frame on that and the money on that is too large. So, you could argue that the best option is to fix, but at this point, we would argue that it's too far gone.
Okay, which is the coal fire. Can we go to another question, Nathan?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. For maybe one person from each team, for us as the audience, what would you have us, by what criteria would you have us judge this or view this round? Like current cost benefit, potential cost benefit that could happen in the future? I mean, how would you like us to weigh this issue as we hear you both argue?
Yes.
All of the above? Okay.
Better?
I just say that it's up to the person assessing the situation. If we're seeing like past events, we can say that history has shown us, has taught us a lot. So when what we thought was bad for us now we think is good, but what we thought was good for us now we think is bad. So it keeps changing. So you should weigh both sides.
Personally, I want you to consider potential cost of this talk, because this debate is for future classmates of our human beings. So please consider potential cost as well.
Any other question? Right.
I guess I have a two-part question for the pro-nuclear energy. I guess the first part of the question is about the short-term implication on the price of oil and the oil market. The second question deals with the long term, and if fundamental shifts in society's mindset and consumption patterns are necessary in order to make the shift to nuclear even sustainable, or if there's some other societal kind of issues that might come to play that could be obfuscated with nuclear power.
Okay, so a two-part question. The first about oil prices in short term. It's directed at the negative team, I believe.
Okay, so we can just see like oil prices in general have risen heavily in the past few years. And it's actually not because of the supply and demand, it's actually because of the incidents associated with them. We can see like yesterday, a swordfish actually crashed into one of the pipes of the BP oil, offshore oil drill, and that actually delayed their process of offloading oil for 5 days. So we have to see the fact that oil prices are not as much associated to factors inside. We can say like nuclear power is going to affect the prices of oil, yes, but it's also going to be due to other factors which are not associated.
Yeah, I have a question. Khushal, how do you know all these things? You really are divine. Second question that Brian asked was, how about our thinking about nuclear power?
Yeah.
Can you repeat? I'm sorry.
Can you rephrase?
I guess the rephrasing would be if nuclear power is exactly the answer, or does this have to be accompanied with a mindset shift change in the way that we engage in energy consumption or consumption patterns?
Definitely, because we see such a shift because countries like Pakistan have a 6% rate of growing in nuclear energy, but they're actually expanding. Whereas you see France, it's actually cutting down on producing nuclear energy. It just depends on the government and the supply and demand of people that associated with it. Because nuclear power plants are really expensive to start, but it's actually really not that hard to keep it going. Whereas other power plants are the reverse of it.
Oh my God, you know so much. You're like an encyclopedia. Mr. Piracha, ladies and gentlemen. That's all. How about another question, perhaps one for the affirmative team?
I have a question actually from both sides. No one brought to attention the international relations part of this, where if we abolish how can you really abolish
Well,
nuclear powers?
and I feel like we did bring up the idea of international relations with the argument we presented on proliferation. There's no real way to stop bad people from doing bad things, granted. But the idea of making it harder for them and making it easier for us to catch them does. You can argue all day that we're being misled or anything, but if you look at the basic rhetoric, people that have a history of threatening and arguing, and if they have the nuclear capabilities, they will make them nuclear weapons. Iran has blatantly said, "Oh, we're just trying to make nuclear power," and yet we have been shown evidence that they're actually working on a weapon. North Korea themselves have blatantly been trying to test nuclear weapons, and threatening everyone with the little man syndrome. And the idea that you can't stop proliferation or the root cause of it, that's a different debate altogether. But what we're arguing is, if we do abolish nuclear power, it will take us in the right direction as a society to change the mindset of how we go about energy consumption and forms of energy, and that will in turn lead us to the talks about proliferation and what do we do with these weapons.
Okay, we have time for probably one or two more questions.
So I guess my question's towards the affirmative. Why is nuclear power intrinsically tied to nuclear proliferation? I mean, Japan's had nuclear power for a long time. They have not proliferated. But there's examples of many countries similarly.
Right. Well, first, Japan isn't kind of allowed to do anything, military-wise. But I would say that our history has proven, if you look at it in a very overview kind of way, that people with nuclear capabilities tend to proliferate. The U.S. was first, USSR was next, so on and so forth. I mean, you can go into it all day. It would take me about half an hour.
Okay, one last question.
What we argue is, and we've said this before, we can argue all day that the improvements of nuclear power are fine, and that's great. In fact, I'm happy that that's happening on a personal level, but the problem is there's already too many of these old, out of date, can't function properly power plants.
So would you get behind, like,
I mean, in theory you could, but that's,
in reality, that's just,
yeah, it's not
it's very
arguing
complicated.
against yourself.
Yeah, it's sort of like that. Nuclear power is just so complicated because just building a reactor takes more than 2 years, and then testing it and taking out, the flaws, opportunity cost, everything associated. It takes a lot of time, and just saying to replace it, it's sort of theoretical. So it's either shut them down and make new ones, or it's just shut them down.
Yeah.
But shutting them down is not an option because too many people depend on it.
I see what you did there. In a nutshell, when it comes to improving and fixing, it costs too much in nickels and dimes and people's lives.
Khushal, if you think it's too complicated, I am truly scared. I'm truly scared. Okay, that'll end our portion for question and answers. Didn't they do a great job? We have some devil's advocacy going on this St. Patrick's Day, but we have just enough time reserved to have a summation argument by each side, just 5 minutes to close up this wonderful debate. We'll start with the government.
Okay. I will begin my speech. Okay, on this term, affirmative stance to win the negative is that nuclear proliferation is the most dangerous problem on this round. Therefore, I will confirm the negative issue one by one. First point, negative side, the climate change. However, they fail to prove that after abolition of nuclear power plant, to what extent CO2 will increase. And this increasing the CO2 actually cause the environment And actually, this increasing CO2 caused the human being is totally unknown. Because please imagine how much amount of CO2 damage people. For example, even if CO2 increase 1%, it's not a problem at all on our life, right? How much amount of CO2 will kill the people or kill our lives? It's totally unknown. They fail to prove, they lack of proof on this round. Therefore, this climate change problem is not is a too trivial problem at all. Second point, they argue the sustainability that after abolishing nuclear power plant, that such electricity will be black. Then blackout happen or something. However, because of blackout, what will happen? Such blackout will recover 2 days or 3 days, right? What will happen? It's totally unknown. What's the problem? It's totally unknown. Therefore, please remember our nuclear proliferation issue. That in status quo, that because of having nuclear power plant, that a lot of countries, the Middle East or Iran, North Korea, China, or such countries have nuclear weapons, it automatically means that they can make nuclear weapons. Therefore, that we have danger that to face a nuclear war. Therefore, once nuclear will happen, it may be happen that all human beings will be died. This impact is the most dangerous on this round. Therefore, this is the strong reason to vote for the affirmative. Go to then I will talk about I will refute their argument one by one. They doubt that after abolishing nuclear power plant, there is no alternative energy. This is negative side argument. This is big question. However, please imagine why nuclear power plant has developed so far. The reason is that the government will focus on the nuclear power plant. Then private company shift their investment, the much amount of investment to nuclear power plant. Then such technology of nuclear power plant will develop, and their efficiency of the generating electricity will develop. This is the reason, right? Therefore, this reason applies to the renewable energy. If government abolish nuclear power plant, such private company give up the investment to the nuclear power plant. Then this much amount of investment shift to the renewable energy, right? In such situation, because of such getting much amount of investment, the technological innovation will appear in renewable energy field. Therefore, in such situation, the technology of renewable energy will increase. The efficiency of the generating electricity will increase. Therefore, therefore we can create the alternative energy by abolishing renewable energy. Then move on to the accident issue. They argue that in Chernobyl, no one died by radiation or something. However, they never answered our argument on the first affirmative construct speech. Please remember that in Fukushima, there were a lot of refugees, even in status quo. They failed to answer how this problem can be solved by keeping nuclear power, right? They want them go back to the home. Who want to go back to the home? Even if such impact happens, they fail to answer this point. They just say the radiation is safe, right? They fail to prove how this refugee problem will be solved. Therefore, as long as we, the human, control the nuclear power plant, we couldn't eliminate the risk of accident. This is the second reason to vote for the affirmative. That's all. Thank you very much.
Finally, closing by the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for inviting us to this great for encounter this great audience and great hope and great event. Well, firstly, I will answer to the I will answer to the nuclear proliferation. Then on this point, the House argued nuclear because of nuclear Chernobyl, between the cancer in Chernobyl people and other the people in other areas, there is no difference about that. Therefore, radiation will not harm to the people, even if after accident. Therefore, radiation will not be the reason for abolishing nuclear power plant. Moreover, simply remind yourself that there are the eco-friendly argument, because nuclear power plant is eco-friendly because it never emits CO2 or greenhouse gases, which is apparently leading to contribute to the increase of cancer in the human body. Therefore, considering this effect, that is CO2 emission and greenhouse emission by nuclear power plant, you cannot say in terms of radiation or human health, nuclear power plant is bad for human health. Therefore, it is offset. Therefore, you cannot say that nuclear power plant is not is dangerous. Therefore, now, moreover, they argue that human error occur not. Then on this one, I say that human error could occur. Yes, human error could occur, but this cannot be the reason why we should avoid nuclear power plant. Because as I argued that, for example, if you use driving curve, as long as you drive curve, you cannot eliminate the risk of accident. For example, drunk driving kills many people. Like you can simply imagine. Considering that, can you say that drunk driving is much safer than nuclear power plant? That's awful. Right? Therefore, this is not inherently bad for nuclear power plant. Therefore, human error cannot be the reason why for abolishing nuclear power plant. Then third point, that they argue that refugee could be created by nuclear power plant. As an example, they listed the Fukushima accident. But as my partner said, that this is not inherently to human nuclear power plant, because, for example, to create a water power plant, many people are forced to leave their house. Therefore, this is refugee, right? Therefore, this is not unique to nuclear power plant. Moreover, the assumption is remember that the health impact of nuclear power plant is overstated by the government. Therefore, they are forced to leave to their house. This is Fukushima accident, because the Japanese government overstated the health impact. It is cancer or something. Therefore, the people are forced to leave. But this is misconception, because radiation never harms the people. Therefore, if they never overstate the health impact of nuclear power plant, there's no need to leave. There is no need for refugee. Therefore, refugee cannot be the reason why we should abolish nuclear power plant. Okay. Therefore, maybe you can understand that this is our answer to safety. Therefore, concerning that, nuclear power plant is not so dangerous. It's not more dangerous as other power plant. Then, what is the benefit of nuclear power plant? Then, please remember that the fact is that we cannot abolish nuclear power plant in terms of electricity. The fact is that most of us usually in daily life we depend on nuclear power plant in terms of electricity. Therefore, if there is no nuclear power plant, what is alternative? That's completely unknown. The House argued that renewable energy, thanks to technological innovation, alternative renewable energy can compensate this lack of electricity. But this is completely assertion. But under status quo, in status quo, we depend on nuclear power plant. Third, we can supply stable electricity. Moreover, renewable energy depends on weather condition. However, nuclear power plant will never depend on weather condition, which is very sustainable. By small amount of uranium, we can supply stable electricity for forever sustainability in our life. Therefore, if we abolish nuclear power plant, we cannot supply stable electricity. Therefore, in terms of stability and sustainability, we must depend on nuclear power plant. Therefore, simply imagine that we already answered to the safety of nuclear power plant. Therefore, nuclear power is not so dangerous as we expect. That means there is no reason why we should abolish nuclear power plant. Therefore, you should go for the electricity. If this is on this point, the family argued that we never should actually impact of black action, but you can simply imagine that blackout being to some impact over the nation function will not work. Okay, this is the answer. That's all.
Okay. Join me in thanking all of our debaters. Didn't they do a wonderful job? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're so happy to be able to have this Japanese tour to celebrate our 45th anniversary of involvement with Japanese debate here at the University of North Texas. We've gotten a little gift for our debaters. Can you grab that for us? I present to you Takami and Hirota-san. We're so happy to have you with us here this afternoon. Thank you so much. We have a number number of people that we're really, really grateful for at UNT Debate. We certainly are very, very appreciative of our department chair in communication studies, Dr. Jay Allison, as well as the dean of our college, Art Govern, as well as Catherine Cullivan. This debate is made possible by the Committee on International Discussion and Debate, as well as the Japanese Debate Association in Japan, providing it for an exchange between things. If you saw the news today, you might also have seen that UNT Debate recently qualified 4 different students for the National Debate Tournament coming up in next week. Yay! I want to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on St. Patrick's Day. If you're interested in the discussion, if you're interested in the debate today or in UNT Debate, please come up and join us as well. We'll host a meet and greet upstairs in our squad room, which is room 325. Thanks everyone for having a great time with us. And if you missed the sign-up sheet, it's right up here with Mr. Sloss.